Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Katie and today we are gonna go beyond the box. The February scrawlrbox to be precise. If you haven't already, please make sure you've hit that subscribe button, and if you've enjoyed watching this video as well, please remember to give me a thumbs up. It really does help the channel to grow and it enables me to carry on making these lovely videos for you to enjoy. Although saying that, I do actually quite enjoy making these videos myself too. So, speaking of the last scrawlrbox we had, a number of you mentioned in the comments that the theme of this box as well as the colour scheme would be just perfect to do a Finley and Claudia painting, which is exactly what I've done here. If you don't know who Finley and Claudia are, I kind of developed these characters a couple of years ago when I did my first mermaid challenge on the channel. Last year I attempted the mermaid challenge, but I was about to move house and it was just very difficult trying to juggle everything around. It's been making me think a little bit about this year actually, and whether or not I should do mermaid. It's a lot of prompts, it's a lot of work, and things are different to a couple of years ago when I did have the time to do it. I don't quite have as much free time to do a daily prompt anymore. So I think I might just do a really nice epic picture of Finley and Claudia for you guys to enjoy, and I'll post that throughout the month of May. I might do one or two of them. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Please don't be upset with me though for not doing mermaid. It's a big project, especially when I have other things I want to be doing too. But anyway, let's concentrate on this one. So I decided to try a different paper this time round. I went for the Stonehenge hot press watercolour paper because I wanted to see how these would perform on a different surface. And as well, this paper is a little bit bigger and it just makes it a lot easier for me to work on there. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind a nice A5 surface to work on. That's usually the standard we get in most of the subscription boxes that fit through your letterbox anyway. And I find that it's, especially if I want to do something intricate, I can't quite do that with paint. I can do it with drawings, but when it comes to paint, it's too finicky and it takes a lot longer, and I want to work smart here. So using a larger sheet of paper just allows me to do that. Because we've got quite a smooth surface here in comparison to the Clairefontaine paper that we had in the box, it was quite interesting to see how the paint behaved on this. I wouldn't say it was as smooth as I expected it to be, at least on the first coat. And I don't actually mind that. I don't mind there being a little bit of texture there. However, I wasn't quite fully expecting it. But once those layers have built up, just like on the other paper, that gorgeous luminosity came through and it did eventually mostly even things out. Of course, the advantage to this as well though is you can manipulate your work so those textures that are created actually become part of the piece, rather than thinking, oh no, it's not doing what I want it to do. It's okay, I've got to think about this is how it's going to behave. How can I adapt that to the picture? And luckily, because it's an underwater scene, everything's a little bit wavy, I guess, so I don't mind them textures being there. As you saw at the start of the video, I'd already pre-sketched this and I decided to use a coloured lead mechanical pencil to do this. I didn't particularly want to get any graphite on there, and it wouldn't matter how much I'd try and lighten it with a kneadable eraser, I'd still have that residue there, and I don't think, for me personally, it would have fitted in very well with those pastel colours and the type of picture I was going for here. I also do introduce, just to, I guess, get some of those darker tones in there, I do use the Derwent Inktense paint pans. I've had them for years. I didn't receive them in that particular scrawlrbox, I hadn't subscribed at the time, but I did pick them up anyway because of the art shop that I work in sometimes. So I'm still going to say It's probably cheating a little bit, but it did actually just help to bring out some of those shadows. I didn't particularly want to use the grey or the deeper colours in the pastel palette. I just didn't think that would work. So just introducing darker versions of what we got in there, I guess achieved what I wanted it to. And because it was Derwent and they obviously use the same binder in the pastel one as they do in the Intense one, it seemed quite appropriate, and I think it worked out quite well. Now, I'm sure you can see I went for a bit of an Art Nouveau style here. I really just wanted to have that gorgeous swishing hair that I always draw for Finley. And as well, I actually quite liked how the corals, the orange corals in the background, sort of added to that framework. Surrounding her in a circle, I guess, created a nice bubble for her, you could say that, and obviously I'm going to introduce bubbles onto this picture too, so it all just fit in quite nicely. I absolutely adore how well all of these colours match together though. The pastel set, I do think, it was something I wasn't really planning on buying, but it had been on my radar, but I am so glad I've got to try it, and I kind of wish I'd tried them sooner, but then I would have ended up with 2 palettes, so I guess it's worked out quite nicely. But I love, even though they're pastels, there's just this gorgeous luminosity to them. And I thought working on a different surface, we'd lose that, or it would change the properties, but I was really pleasantly surprised. Like I say, it's just those textures that I found a little bit different, and maybe this is just one of them paints where you're not supposed to work too neatly and too tightly as I am here, and you're just supposed to let them pigments just do their own thing. I'm still really happy with how nicely they layer up, and of course the layers you put on top of the pre-existing layers, they're not bringing anything back to life, which is something I quite like. Don't get me wrong, certain paintings I don't mind if it reactivates the paint below, but most of the time I just kind of want it to stay put, and sometimes you can't just get a layer of paint right the first time round. You've got to keep working on it, and it's nice to be able to do that with this medium where it's just not going to affect things, and if anything it just makes the layers you put on top more enhanced from what's underneath it. Does that make sense? Am I waffling a little bit here? So some of my favourite colours from this palette, which I just think work amazingly together, whether you're layering them or putting the colours side by side or doing a wet and wet technique, was the turquoise and the mint. I thought that just made the most beautiful combination for the sea in the background there, and it didn't clash too much with Finley's body either. I know she's a blue mermaid, and obviously most sea pictures are going to be blue, but it didn't interfere, because when it came to painting Finley's body, I introduced the cornflower blue with the turquoise blue, and that worked out quite nice. I did go in there as well additionally with a little bit of blue ink tints, again just to create some more depth and shadows in there and some form to Finley. Another one of my favourite colour combinations as well, which I think worked really well together, was the pink flamingo and the orchid pink. They were just chef's kiss, wonderful to work with, and again using a slight wet and wet technique, just applying one colour down and then introducing another into it while it's still wet. I loved it. I just loved how they complemented each other really well. They weren't great for building up tone with, and I guess they're pastels, they're not really meant to be there for adding shadows or anything, and you're quite limited as to how much depth you can get in there. But what we lacked in depth, we get in vibrancy there. And again, as you can see, especially with these pink tones, that additional layer, and it wasn't a massively higher concentration of paint in there either. It was literally perhaps just a swipe of the brush in the pan, just adding it to what I'd mixed into my palette and going over the top of it. And again, it surprised me just how vibrant these were. Of course, it's time to introduce a little bit of line work, and again this is where the Intense comes in handy. So they have some similar but deeper hues in their Intense palette, and not all of them are going to match. I did have to mix a couple of them up just so they'd be more complementary. I wanted to do this I guess instead of adding black outlines, I think it just would have been too harsh. So just adding a more deeper version of the colours that were in the pastel palette worked really well. As you can see with the orange corals in the background there, it's just made things pop out a little bit more. Again, because the tonal variation isn't massive, I felt like they were getting a little bit lost in the background there, but just adding that little outline. Doesn't need to be with black paint or pencil or pen, just going around it with a rigger brush or a fine detail brush. It was just perfect for the job, and it just meant none of those details I'd spent a long time drawing in got lost. Now, I'm going to have a quick chat about the Upcrate box. Well, I've still got your attention, hopefully. I really enjoyed that one too, and I'm going to be uploading a Beyond the Box for Upcrate very soon. I have it sketched out, and if you've enjoyed a Finley and Claudia video today, then you will not be disappointed with the Upcrate one, as we are continuing the Finley and Claudia theme here, and I think you'll like what I've done. I've kind of kept with the same theme that I'd done with Upcrate, and I'm super excited to get started with the paint on that. I've already sketched it all out, but I'm super looking forward to getting the paint on there and sharing that experience with you. And again, I'll be using the Stonehenge watercolour paper just because it's a bit bigger than the A5 surface, and I don't think I have any large sheets, at least, of that Saunders Waterford that came in the box. So it'll be purely for science to see how those paints interact on a different surface too. Now it's time to add some of the colours into the bubbles there, and as you could see, it was a wet and wet technique. I'd just lay one colour down and then introduce two others into it and just let it do its thing, let the paint interact with all the different pigments and just see what happens. And there was a slight translucency to it, so some of the details behind it weren't lost. That's if I decided to put them in there. Followed it up with a outline using the Inktense, and I do go around and use some white gouache just to sort of add the highlights, because this palette didn't have a white in there, and I mean, I'm not a big lover of white watercolours, I don't use them very often, but I actually think one in the actual pan set would have been quite beneficial. But I'm just nitpicking there. Anyway, you can see that I've added Claudia on there also, kept it super simple, just added her form and some highlights for her eyes, as well as adding all the highlights everywhere else. I've really enjoyed making another video with these pans. I'm sure I'll feature them again in the future. I do hope you like what I've created with this as well. There should be some more videos on screen now I think you're going to love, so why not click on one of them? Of course, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you lovely lot soon. Bye!